June 7th, 2021. We will follow the agenda for the issue which was posted in the repository, which was issue number 71. I'm just navigating there. If people can add themselves to the attendees here. Oops, hold on. Paste the link in to the chat. There's the link. And so before we get started, does anybody have any announcements or anything that they'd like to share?
No, not really.
No? Okay, well, let's move on to the issues we have tagged. So the two first ones, I think, will probably keep us busy. The first one is looking at the survey feedback that we got. Last time we got together, we looked at the first part, but we can go through the second part. And then if we get through that, we have the second issue, which is the key technical areas. We've got some feedback from the collaborator base in terms of what they saw was important and so forth. So we can take a look at that. So I will start by opening up the feedback we got from the survey, and we can start to go through that. Okay, let me find that. So this is the one. Right, so let me just share, just so that share screen people can see. Okay, so this is the slide deck. I think last time we spent a good amount of time looking at the constituencies. So basically where people identified with, and then the gaps that were not covered. We dove into the comments. We came up with a PR, which I can go back to, which basically I landed recently, which was to update the constituencies based on the survey that we got. So we basically had agreed to add in, education and security practitioners. So that's sort of catching people up as to where we were from the last discussion. At this point, we can move on to the next set of questions in terms of the, what people thought was important. And I'm trying to see bigger. Is that big enough for people to see yet?
Maybe one more time, I think.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, I think it's okay. A bit small, but I think it's okay for everyone. I hope so.
Let's see. I'll try. Does it? Okay, doesn't seem to let me get any bigger. So that's. Can people read that?
Not easily. I wonder if is it an image? Can you open it in a new tab or something? Right click.
Right click. I could save the image. Let's see, what else can I do to? Is making my screen bigger help at all? Like, does that, when I did that, did it get any bigger or just stay the same?
I think everything is scale up, but not really the answer. So the question is,
okay. Yeah. Let me see. I seem to have unpaused. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing here for a second. Maybe, is there?
I mean, we can also just pull it up on our own and, discuss from there. No need to.
But I think it was mostly to show what we were talking about to some people were watching after. But yeah, but I think it will be pretty hard to If maybe because it's a PDF file, maybe if you download it with Adobe or something else, you can zoom better than you.
Maybe that's okay. So let me write. That's a good point. Maybe you're right if I actually download that. It's a very good idea. Come on. Okay. So code. Surveys, download, because that may help a lot. Because there I can zoom, okay. It gets a little fuzzier, but it still may be better than. Okay, that's not bad. Okay, let me try sharing that now. How's that?
Way better.
Okay, great idea for downloading. So we can go through here in terms of maybe we'll take a look at like through the ones that we had, how people identified or didn't identify. And then we can look at, there was also a write-in for things that, potentially we didn't think about. So obviously this good understanding of a direction and of the project seemed to really resonate.
And consumable API and doc also. I think it's the first one with a percentage.
That's what I was going to ask, is if we had a way to see them in order.
No, I just looked while Michael was scrolling, and I think with 81%, it's the first one. I think after this one, the other is around 60%. I see a 63, 64. So the first one will be this one, 81.
Yeah, it would be good to get this into a spreadsheet or something where we could sort, but it seems like we can look at it manually for right now.
Did we have that? The one that got the most is actually rather an ambiguous option for what its meaning is. I'm trying to remember when we did the planning. I actually may have missed that meeting too, but what did we intend by that part?
I think that's around like how easy is it to use the APIs and understand what you need to do from the docs is what I would read into that. But again, you're probably right that we don't have, the way we did it is through the fun retro, we put down things and then discuss them. So I don't think we have anything more detailed than this list. Although maybe I'm forgetting. So let me take a look here at what we've got in the repo, because I don't want to. We've got our in the code constituency needs. So so actually no, I stand corrected. We have here. This is what we meant. API and docs which are up to date and simple to understand and use. Example code for one or more use cases of the APIs.
Okay, this one seems to me like what I would call like table stakes. Like of course it's important to everybody. Otherwise they wouldn't use it. Like they wouldn't use Node at all if it didn't have that, right? So like I don't necessarily see a ton of value in seeing that one's the top. Like it's kind of like, well, yeah. So
sure, it's a good reminder though that we always there seems to be consistent criticism that like our docs are not as good as they should be, right? And so this is kind of just a reminder that, this is one of the highest asks that people would have of us.
Yeah, I don't know if we have something else about documentation or on the feedback. I don't, so I think this one, it's pretty much like you said, the documentation stuff.
In that light, that would make more sense. And you're right. I'm looking down the rest of the list and I don't see docs either. So that if we called this one docs, right? As far as like moving forward, that to me makes sense. And also I understand why it would end up being the top rated as well in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to characterize that one.
Yeah.
That's probably a good way. Let's go down the list of, well, what's the next one?
The next one will be a 63 or 64, yeah, something.
Okay.
This one, I think it's this one, and after it will be relevant APIs in core.
Okay, so predictable and stable releases. That's a good to see that. I think that, I guess the follow-on questions would be, do we think, like for that one, I think we actually have a pretty good story, right? Like in terms of, we have a well-defined LTS process. We've been executing on it for a number of years. So I would say, that's like confirmation that what we're doing there is important. We should continue to do it, but I wouldn't see any action items. But maybe that's what we have to figure out. So, on these, what would our next steps to figure out, are we adequately covering them or not? And maybe that's one of our brainstorms where we can come up with our perspective on that at least.
So to me, this is like, James made that proposal a few months ago about like changing the release process, or, and this to me would be to take to that conversation and say, a lot of people say that the predictability and the stability is really important. Would that affect how that conversation went?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely good data. And then but the second thing is like, maybe out of this, we want to come up with how well do we think we're doing on each of these, as that's sort of a thing to help prioritize if we're looking at like what's important to work on. But okay, so that one, then the next one you said was
core API. This one, relevant API in core, just for about
right, here we go, 63, right? Okay, so relevant. So again, that's sort of like, we need to be up to date-ish. We can't just let things go stale. Next after this, so go ahead.
Yeah, I don't remember if relevant API in core was also linked to, let's say, up-to-date API like fetch or stuff like that. I don't remember.
So here's what we had written. APIs in key areas across the different types of applications, CLI, web cloud, cloud native.
Okay.
APIs which are complete enough that they can be used without additional dependencies. So this is kind of, so fairly broad, but I think it's interesting. The next one after that is...
you have consistent and intuitive error handling. Yep.
Right, okay. So handling of errors is important. Easy installation. This seems to be up there too. What's next after that one?
Yeah, the good understanding, but I think we talked about this one at the start, the first one of the list.
The project, okay, so direction of the project, yep.
You will have a runtime diagnostic tooling just here.
Right.
Module dependency info management and reasonable resource usage performance.
Right. Good CVE practices. Better CVE management in the ecosystem is interesting. Not so high.
So now that we've kind of gone through some of them, my thinking here is like the most value here would be to maybe take out the top, 5 and the bottom 5, and like maybe take that to a larger audience, saying like, here's what people find important. Here's what people didn't find important.
Right.
Because there's a lot in the middle, but like, I don't know if we can gain a lot of valuable information from those ones. I think. But just looking at, easy contribution is actually higher than like better ways to build consensus in the project like we could probably cross-section that and see that that's like almost entirely core contributors or somebody who has, you know.
Yeah. Like what our first thing was to like validate that we had a decent list. And so it's interesting to look at the lower ones, but I also agree with like the comment you just made, Wes, that just because they're low doesn't mean they're not, like we didn't get validation. Is that like I would have actually expected some of these to be lower because it's a smaller subset of the bigger group that we went to. So I guess it's like
we could do like a cross-reference of those and find like which constituencies map to which important things, because that would then validate our constituency to feature matrix that we have, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The interesting one I see is like ways to fund their work is, and I guess that's again maybe just a particular subset of the, like that wouldn't be the end users, right? So much as the.
Well, it might just be end users who are more like, you know, in tune with open source needs, you know. But still, even so, I think just this list is only valuable if we sort it. And then even then, it could be a bit misleading because things will fall to the bottom that are super important, but to a certain constituency. So I think like our presentation of this to the broader, you know, community should probably go a little bit more, you know, slicing and dicing to find the parts.
I mean, for me, we can go look at the ones we missed. The one of the key things was like we'd come up with a list that we think this was actually a good list. And so my question is here, like, do any of these numbers make us think that one of these things really isn't a need? Is one question. And I'm not sure that I see anything in there that says like we didn't get 0 for anything. And the ones which are lower, you know, are potentially understandable because of that reason of, hey, it was a subsection, right? So it doesn't mean they're not still important, not still something that we need, has a need. It's just that, yeah, okay, there was a smaller subset and we still got confirmation that the people in that group likely, you know, saw that as a reasonable thing. So before we look at the ones that were missed, like, does anything here stand out? I guess is like, is there a surprise here to anybody?
Not really.
I mean, I'd look at this and kind of say, at least from what people said about the list we came up with, is that it was probably a pretty good list in terms of, you know, there's good, you know, all of the ones somebody found matched and, you know, a reasonable amount, right?
True. And I think with the result, we have a lot of people who really see Node.js as a mature and a stable language. And from other languages, I think it's also a lot of feedback from people using it in production, maybe in bigger company, or really being used as a key tool for users and for company. Because you have a lot of stuff linked. I think the bigger percentage is documentation, is stable release, good understanding of the direction of the project, which I think it's also a bit linked to release.
Yeah, no, I see what yeah, it shows that there is a good section of the base who, you know, would reflect what you would want in a production sort of real life app versus hey, I'm experimenting side of things.
We technically have some level of answer to that question along with which constituencies do you identify with? I don't know if I can't remember. I think it's a little bit of both.
Yep.
And it kind of lines up, I think, to what you were just saying, which is like, I don't know, 93% of people responded that they identify as an application developer. 60% say direct end user, which I think lines up with what you were saying, which is, you know, people who are working in the, you know, using it in their day-to-day work.
And even 40% are operators, right? Which is a pretty high, like, this is something I'm operating as a thing.
Yeah, I wonder if that's, I mean, it's got to be, seeing as the numbers are there, but I think a lot of that's going to be DevOps, sort of setups, right? Where people probably checked off, I'm a direct end user, I'm an application operator, and I'm an application developer.
Right.
Right. Probably even library and package authors. I'm actually surprised that one ranked so high. I would have thought less people. Yeah.
Well, I guess lots of people write packages, at least for their own internal use too, right? So I guess that's one where like I don't know if we'd want to have a different constituency, but like we could have asked whether it was like you publish libraries for other people to use, or, you're writing libraries to develop yourself. But
that's definitely something. Oh, go ahead.
Go.
Okay, I was going to say that's something I've seen internally at Netflix. Is a lot of people say they publish packages, but they're packages that are only consumed by their team.
Right.
Whether or not and some of them even say, well, yeah, I write libraries, but they actually are part of a monorepo and don't even publish them. Okay. So I think there's a little bit of ambiguity there, which is fine. One of the benefits of this module ecosystem we have is that they don't always have to publish them, and that's fine, but they think about them as libraries, so they might have workflows that are library-like. But yeah, it's good.
Okay, and I think just before we move on, like the last thing, which was kind of interesting, is just this, it was like 5% said they had needs which weren't covered. So I think that at least says, well, like 95% of the people felt that we'd covered off what they were looking for. So maybe if we now flip over to look at, if I can find that, the survey results where we can look at what we might have missed. And is this readable?
Yep, at least yep.
Okay. Now this is where I need to find the.
Yeah, I think it was this one.
I think it was in the wrong order, right? So, right. What needs are not covered in the list?
Yeah.
And that's readable for people?
Yep, the size is good.
Okay. So basically the first one, I guess, is people talking about, just the stability of the project itself. So like, hey, I'm making an investment. I need to know this is going to continue. So that's interesting that we didn't. How would we factor that into the needs? Is that?
So the way I read this answer is somebody who is assessing a stronger commitment to supporting Node, probably at a company, because otherwise, why would you care about 10 years out?
Right.
And if that is the case, I would think that popularity and usage statistics would be the thing that would help them gain that understanding. Growth of the ecosystem, stuff like that, which, I don't know how well we do at talking about that kind of stuff.
Right.
I'm exposed to it because I'm here, but I would be interested to see if there's like some people who are less in touch with the ecosystem who still need to assess for their company whether Node is a good, choice. Where would they go,
right.
to see that? And that's definitely something I don't have an answer for. So if somebody asks me, I'd be like, I don't know, but Node's pretty popular. But that's not a great answer for an org trying to make a big bet on it.
So is that is that a need here which we should add in? Like I don't know the exact words, but that does seem like a need we could add in terms of like, there's people come to they're not maybe a constituency yet, but we'd like them to be. I can easily see like that would fall under like orgs need this, right? Like they come and they need the assets that show why Node is a good bet.
Yeah, but I think it could also be linked to release management, as if we have a bigger plan about release, it can also be helpful for people who want to choose a technology. And also, if we push it this way, it can also be linked to the community part. Do we have just basically meetup conferences or stuff like that? So I know we have a lot of that, but maybe some people find it hard to find this kind of information. I don't know.
So just to see if there was anything that I had just missed, because I don't click on these links very often, but I clicked on the About tab on the website, and I was actually really surprised that there's an HTTP server code block at the very top of the page. And I'm like, wait a sec, that's actually probably not what somebody who's clicking the About tab on the Node.js website is actually even looking for. Like, I would actually think if I clicked on the About tab, I would see something about the impact of Node.js today. Like this looks like somebody forgot to rewrite the About Node.js page, since it was an early days platform focused very much on
where you find that?
Yeah, but
about here, right? Second. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But you have also, it's About page, but it's also linked to community, working group, release, with every information of the latest LTS, current, pending, and stuff like that.
Yeah, which is great. I think we should, to me, this answer, though, signifies like some piece is missing from somebody trying to figure out the rest of the ecosystem. And to be honest, the HTTP server is probably not the right thing to have at the top of that page. Like maybe we need to have like a landing page that gives both the community and the blurb about, what it is. It's fine. A code block of the server is probably not very valuable there.
No, even I think the release page would be more useful to be the first one when you click on About than the current About page.
So this, I think I take those. I take Wes's point that like none of these are actually like why bet on Node, right? Like wherever the order is or whatever, a why bet on Node probably makes sense in terms of a sell, and so I think that's that. Like I'm just taking a note here that I think that's one we should consider as a missing need in terms of the like assets that say why you would bet on Node. And so organizations that are coming and, we can prioritize with everything else, but I could see that being like, if you want us to be successful, we want people to have those assets and to say, okay, I am going to bet on Node, right?
Yeah, totally. I think about like, when we were putting together the thing for the collab space and Darcy brought all these stats from the GitHub and NPM ecosystem stuff. And like, that's the kind of stuff where if you're a director and you're, company and you got a bunch of engineers saying, hey, like we want to write some JavaScript on the server. Can we make a big bet on this and like hire some new people? If I'm the director, that's the thing I want to look for. I don't really care about what the technology platform is. I want to know that there's, 10 billion downloads a month on the thing and big companies are committed to it. And we've got, an active contributor base of, hundreds of people. Like that's the stuff. And I actually don't see that even in the like working groups and these other things. Like it's targeted toward the contributors. It's targeted toward the programmers, the ICs. We have nothing targeting the like why choose Node as an organization, that would appeal to the, director or non-technical person.
I think there's the marketing team, which is now like under the OpenJS Foundation. So it may be marketing more than Node, but you're right that I don't think we've got that connection. And I'm thinking now, like I've been writing internal decks to say like, hey, we've got a bunch of products. I want to convince those products that we should be putting the assets in place for Node.js developers. And that's exactly the kind of thing I've been like trying to say, like, here's some numbers. Why is Node so important? Here's the numbers. And so having that is probably a common resource that would be very, very useful. Okay, so I've got a note on that. I think I have an idea of, I can submit a PR to add that in as one of our needs. Maybe we can move on to the next things there. Good type information. That's very specific. I'm not sure we would add that in as one of the specific needs, but I think it's good feedback in terms of our technical priorities. Just that somebody felt strongly enough to pull that out.
Seems to be a whole lot of requests in that list for TypeScript support.
Right. Yes, I see. Yeah, exactly. You're right. So TypeScript is obviously on the top of people's mind. I guess the question is that something like, does that fit into one of these needs in terms of our relevant APIs, or is it actually something different that should be its own line?
That's hard to say. I wonder too, because I don't know for certain, but where is the collaboration happening between us as the Node project and TypeScript as a language ecosystem? Like, is it happening just one-off in the repositories? Like the types that most people use are not coming from, they're coming from definitely typed as far as I understand. And technically there's no official tie-in there. So like, maybe that's what they're asking for, is like that there's more clear guidance on how we maintain the types that are published, whether we publish them or not.
Yeah, and there's been a recent effort to add, I believe it's documentation, so that we could generate the types from the internal, the Node repo. So I know there's some effort and some people pushing that forward. I think it might be Bradley. But I think there isn't like a strong, like there isn't a types team or working group or something like that. It might be something that, like, out of this effort, we think that's one of the things we might foster, is like, how do we actually make more progress on that front, or at least make the story better defined? Because I know at some points there was like, hey, we should add the types, and then even the people from the TypeScript ecosystem were kind of like, no, don't bundle them in. That'll just make things harder, right? And so, but it does seem like it's a big enough thing that we need to have a clear view, story, plan kind of thing in my mind.
I mean, I know I pushed a release of an internal tool that's written in TypeScript the other day for the first time, and I had to just disable the type linting because it just like was broken. And I don't know why, because I don't write TypeScript, and it was like definitely a painful thing for me to push a release on this thing that I didn't understand. And so having that experience like definitely drives home, and it was the Node types. Like, and I would have never thought that would have been the thing that would have broken. Still don't know why. Like, somebody else who writes TypeScript came in and fixed it for us, and like, great, but like not great from a user experience, especially, if I didn't have the confidence that disabling the type linting was going to still be fine. And that definitely is a story where, all the battles that we had in Express with this was always painful. It would definitely be, something worth at least having like a really clear best practice around from the platform, so that we don't, introduce those kind of user experience problems.
Okay, so maybe let's move on to some of the others, but I took a note that TypeScript is called out a number of times in the needs, and we can kind of, not sure whether that's actually like a separate need or fits into our technical priorities, but we'll note that for now. The next one was game developers. I think that's potentially a constituency versus another need.
I would love to know more specifically what the person was doing. So like when I think of game developers in JavaScript, I think of people shipping UIs, not necessarily people writing game servers. That's not to say you can't write a game, the server side part of a like a multiplayer game or something like that in Node. But also at that point, isn't it just like an application, like fit into the application developer constituency? Yeah, like maybe they have different needs, but they're writing an application. It's just that application has specific needs.
As a game developer myself, like a few things I'm looking. One major thing I'm looking forward to is the quick implementation. That'll be like excellent for just game server stuff. but also like I would really like to see like WebGL support. Like at some point, I don't know that would ever happen because it's not.
Can you talk more about that? That's the first time I've heard that ask. I'm wondering what would you use that for?
Well, if there was like WebGL support, we seem to have like at least some desire to try and replicate some of what's in the browser. And like so far, most of that ask is around like server orient things that make sense in a server. But Node is not necessarily for servers. It's just a platform that you can run whatever. There's like command line tools and all sorts of stuff you can build with it. But UI stuff is a thing you can do with it, and like there's kind of other diverging projects like Electron that do that. It would be cool to have a similar sort of thing, like even if it was a diverging project, which was just Node plus WebGL and like whatever other things you'd need, the like audio stuff as well.
But you're thinking for execution on the desktop versus through the browser remotely or through the browser, I guess.
Yeah. So just like reproduce the like WebGL API and whatever audio APIs in a thing that you can just run anywhere. And you could theoretically kind of like write a game for like Nintendo Switch or something like that. Like that'd be super cool to be able to do that.
Yeah, so I think this is where I was wondering. That's why I wanted you to go into it more, because there's like not only is there the WebGL stuff, but there's the web audio APIs. Like there's a bunch of these things that if that was what you were going to build, you would want maybe not the DOM API, but like a bunch of the other, things that ship in modern browsers. And so finding the line there, I think, would be a really interesting, what gets included and what doesn't is what I meant by finding the line. Like, obviously shipping HTML and CSS is like, well, we've got browsers, like let them do that. The Node platform probably doesn't need it. But it's interesting to know that like you could use WebGL in Node to make a game for the Switch where you wouldn't need all of the rest of the stuff for the browser. So yeah, I think that's like an interesting one that might end up being like a niche where like if somebody got really into it and wanted to, ship an NPM package that compiled that against, that was usable in Node, so I'm thinking like Johnny 5, that was like a really good, important thing to be able to start talking to IoT devices. Like if there was a library like that implemented WebGL in userland, in theory, that should be possible as far as I know. I'm not by far not an expert there, but like, would there be changes in core that could like enable those kind of userland modules, like you said, to be like a piggyback project? I mean, would that be enough for Node?
How like most, at least console environments work, it's not really reasonable to just like write an NPM module and call it done. It would kind of be more like an Electron situation where like you have to have a custom build that integrates all this stuff. Because like a lot of these environments like won't let you run external code, or the way their build process works, there's no file system on a lot of these systems, so you can't load stuff. You have to have it like built, like baked into the binary or like things like that. So having an Electron-like thing or something to do that would be cool.
Why is it Electron-like versus Electron?
Well, just Electron has a bunch of extra stuff that the game developer wouldn't care about. Like it's a whole browser in it, basically. But like was already said, like the DOM and things like that, you don't really need.
Yeah, I guess is stripping it down to just have that make it significantly different enough that.
Well, so that's where it borderlines on some of the other ideas about like building a node that doesn't have like the HTTP stack or like all these other things that you could exclude. Say you were writing, and this is not just a game development, say you're writing a CLI and you want it to be super slim and really fast. So you would want to compile out all, and like cross-platform, like say you wanted to build like a Go binary style thing that you distribute to your customers, right?
Yep.
And so it'd come with the full platform. If you wanted to do that today, you're shipping a huge binary. Like I've done this and it's a gig or whatever, you know. If you could compile out all of those things that you don't need and end with just some basic things, you could do the same kind of thing for a game, and that would have that sort of feature set would have applicability more than just in the gaming scenario. It would be great for CLIs. It'd be great for, you know, deploying to a serverless environment where you wanted really fast startup times, right? Like there's all these little things where that feature set could be leveraged. And then if we had things like a quick module, say we had an easy way to bundle library code into a Node.js build, right? Then you could have it live as an NPM module, but when you do your build infrastructure, it outputs a single binary that just has the Node APIs you use and your userland code and the like whatever userland WebGL implementation you pulled in. Like if that was a core API, I think it would enable a lot of people to start using Node in an ecosystem where that startup latency is a big factor for them and why they might not choose that today. So we got a little bit into the technical.
Yeah, we're a little bit in the weeds. I think we've, took a few notes there. Let's keep on looking.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's used mRuby, but it's a great example of like, it has a module system, but like its entire like core API is part of module system that there's just like a default set that like all this stuff is pulled in unless you tell it not to. But you can like trim it down to like, this build has literally nothing in it and it can't do anything actually useful, but I can build it this way, or I can just like pick and choose which things I want.
The above select would be good enough. Okay, so a built-in module that can replace HTTPS for backend frameworks.
That's an interesting one. Without more details, though, I don't know we can get a lot into it. Like, so we were talking and we sort of tabled a bunch of it about the new HTTP APIs.
Yep.
And I almost think the plan that we had there solves for this, because we would have a lower level API and then a higher level API, and that might be, what they're asking here. Like the higher level API is what I was thinking, right? So instead of having Express or Festify, you could just use the built-in high level HTTP API. Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we can note that and keep moving, see what the overall trend is. Not having politics injected into every facet of my life. I'm not sure we can get that point, I suspect. Yeah, I don't know. I'll leave that as it is. We can think bringing a standard library such as other languages. So I think, is that asking for like another set of libraries, not necessarily in core, but which are, closer to core, I guess you might put it.
So the way I think of these is like just an extension of this big core, small core sort of conversation. There's a couple that are kind of like that. And I even think the HTTP thing is like that. It's like, do we have the APIs that people need?
Right.
And where we don't, we should be filling in those gaps, And if it requires you to learn a whole new module ecosystem of things to go and, build a, some web server, like maybe there's parts of that web server stack that could be in core instead that would make it easier. That's the way I read it. I don't know.
Well, that's a good perspective, in that like there may be a few things asking for different specific things, but in the end, they're coming back to like, hey, are we missing some APIs that are key for people?
Yeah, like I think about the like FS module things that have been added over the past few years. It was like, look, no one was using it. They were all using some userland thing that gave recursive file deletes, because that's like mostly what people wanted. So pulling that into core is like absolutely the best decision. And I see a bunch of those on this list as that same type of problem.
Okay, so let's call those. I made a note, and let's add them into that list when we go through them here. So TypeScript, multi-version support on the same system. So this is, I guess, like making it easier to switch between systems.
This is definitely a problem that a lot of people have. I'm just not entirely sure it's not already solved well by NVM. Like, I've contributed to NVM.
Yep.
It's a pain because it's written in Bash, and even Jordan, who maintains it, is, I struggle to get maintainers, but it just works.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Kind of questionable whether or not it needs to be an area of focus.
Right. I'm just going to say version. Just keep going through the list.
Maybe one thing is that we don't document using something like NVM on the website. So I do know I've had a lot of people at work who come to support channels, and they're like, look, I installed with the directions that's on the Node.js website, and like, it doesn't work. And it would, it would be nice if maybe it also had NVM documentation or something, but I know that's like blessing one core maintained way, but still.
Yeah, it is part of the foundation now, which is at least one step, step closer. Should we add to the docs? Okay. Just keep going through, see if we see any like themes coming out like that. TypeScript execution with transparent compilation at runtime. I think we already kind of called out the TypeScript was mentioned a number of times, right? Easy way to scale a project under high load.
What platform gives that? Because sign me up. Like,
I want the name.
It depends what you mean by easy, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
I mean, Kubernetes will let you scale and have multiple instances, but whether you'd call that easy. And I guess a number of the others let you scale, but possibly in a much smaller context, right? Like you could have multiple copies running, but
I mean, I can say for certain that scaling anything is hard. That's, just going to be that way. I think having, things like diagnostic tools to help you understand why the scaling is not working like you thought it would is the best probably a platform can do, right? Because it's so dependent. So I don't know that there's a lot other than like the diagnostics work. Obviously performance work, but other than that, you're as soon as you get on multiple machines, it's not really Node's problem anymore. It's like your platform's orchestration for how you scale, and do you scale in response to CPU pressure or like what? Like all of those questions, it depends on your application. So I'm not certain there's a lot to.
Yeah, I see a point just below remote debugging in Kubernetes. So I think it's almost linked to what you just said, Wes. Because I think it's debugging, but it's also a performance analysis and stuff like that. It's I think 5 or 6 upper where you are.
5 or 6 down or up?
Yeah, just you were here. Yep, you just jump 2 lines above. One, yep, this one, remote debugging, just below.
Remote debugging, right, okay, yeah. Right, okay, so we've got 5 minutes. I don't think we're gonna get through the whole list necessarily, so maybe we can continue. So yeah, I think that one is kind of like, so we were at the I think it's good to note, like, this is like, okay, people are scaling, and of course, in large systems, we don't need, like, at this case, we don't need to solve all these, just sort of note them and say, okay, how does that affect our like, I'm not sure I would call that out as a separate constituency need. I think we have performance in here somewhere. Where is, right, reasonable resource usage performance, which is kind of in that scale. So from the macro level need, I think we've got an area where we're covering those kinds of things, as opposed to like a complete gap. Keeping pace with the JS ecosystem. So I think we tried to cover that under the, having the APIs and that kind of stuff. First class support for Yarn. That one, not really. We haven't really said anything about registries or package management, have we here?
Yeah, we do. We have module dependency info and management.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And I think that covers this.
Yep. Okay. So I think that covers that. Yep. No, I'd agree. This is kind of filling in some specifics. Innovation as fast as possible. Safe types, promotion of best practices, maintainable portable code. So I guess you might argue that innovation as a consumable pace is not that. It's more like, I just want innovation as fast as possible.
Yeah, I would say there's going to be some outliers who want things that we as a project would just never commit to. Like you can't both innovate as fast as possible and have a release cadence that companies can consume. So like those just are at odds, and that's fine.
Yeah, I agree. It's worth noting, if we had like 10 of them, then you'd say, okay, maybe we don't have the right balance, but with one, you're exactly right. I want Node.js to migrate TypeScript. We already talked about TypeScript stuff. Remote debugging in K8s. That's interesting. I think we've talked about, like, we definitely have diagnostics in the needs. And so I think we've got to cover at the macro level. Enterprise dependency management to build predictable dependency trees.
So I think so even if we talk about first class support for Yarn, I think what people actually want here is not to have to think as much as they do today about the dependencies they're pulling in. And I don't think that we as the Node project can do any better than NPM or Yarn can do in this regard. I think like I talked to James at one point a little bit about like what it would look like if NPM or if Node shipped its own package manager, whether that was, a fork of NPM or not, whatever. And unfortunately, unless NPM says they're no longer going to support it, like literally when I say NPM, I meant the company whatever. Unless GitHub someday says we're not going to support it, I think it will be close to impossible unless some community member steps up and says, I'll do this for free. Like no company, is going to come in and try to battle with GitHub to take over the place of the NPM CLI. Like it's just not going to happen. So in that regard, I think the package maintenance working group sort of solves this problem, which is like get some folks from NPM and hopefully Yarn in the room and talk about like what gaps those tools are missing, like what aren't they covering? And in the case of like this particular call out, they maybe have some very specific use cases they're considering, and there's already avenues for them to bring those to light via the package maintenance working group and the NPM RFC process, and then the Yarn issue tracker. So like, I'm not sure there's a lot to gain there, except that this is really important to the community. And it sounds like this person thinks there's a gap. Well, I think there's a gap in predictability. Right. So, but.
Right. It's almost like if there was if there was a champion who had strong ideas on how that could be improved, something like a collaboration space to bring the different parties together to agree on how to improve that might make sense. Or
maybe, but I mean, honestly, go to the NPM RFC calls and you'll see there are people bringing up ideas around this all the time, and it gets handled, I think, pretty effectively.
Right. Okay.
I've been very impressed with the progress that is made, and those things have landed in NPM like in a very reasonable time frame. I think, and Yarn has its own different process, and I think they move and land things quite regularly as well. PNPM similarly so, but I think
right.
less resources. So I'm not sure the Node project can do much unless the ecosystem really changes from what it is today on where those how those tools are maintained.
Okay. Simplification of APIs. I think that's kind of related to the APIs that are there, I guess, although it sort of pushes in a different direction to say we should cut things out versus add. I don't think Epic means anything to me. More inbuilt packages for auth. I think that kind of comes under the API side of things. Embedded GDB. So again, this is along the diagnostic side of things.
I'm also disappointed that we removed the bundled CLI debugger, but that's in the past. But that's kind of like this is what they're asking for, which is similar to like the remote debugging in Kubernetes is like the fact that we don't bundle that anymore. I know it was a maintenance problem or whatever, but like I used to use it all the time. And now you have to like SSH tunnel the debugger session across whatever your infra is. And it, it is kind of annoying.
Do you mean node inspect?
Well, that's now what you use. But back in the day, it was I guess it was node inspect, but it was the CLI version where you could just like set a breakpoint in, and inspect things in the CLI. I don't remember the exact name of what that thing was called.
Right, but I think we like node inspect, we have been bundling it, and actually we've moved the code into core now. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, but that's the remote. But that's the thing you have to SSH tunnel. I like the old way. The CLI debugger was literally like no GUI. It was just the CLI debugging interface, so you could S for step through and BT for get my current backtrace. Like there's like a bunch of things you could do without having to have a GUI on your local machine connected up through some sort of debugging the Chrome debugger protocol. The old way was like what I think they're asking for here, which was browser agnostic, which is like literally on the box.
Yeah, I think though, I'll have to go back and look. I thought we actually have that, and that it's like we have been shipping the node inspect client. I could be wrong though. Like that's what my understanding was. We shipped the node inspect client as part of Node, and we're actually now integrating the code base into Node Core as well. Yeah,
but I think that's the new thing. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. This is the part I haven't really.
It is the new thing, but I think it's the new thing that was the CLI replacement. But yeah, it sounds like we should both go look back, and we're 2 minutes over. So I'd say let's loop back again next week. Next time. This has been good. Lots of interesting things to think about here. Next time we'll go through the rest of the list, and we've still got quite a bit to go through. And after we get through that, we can sort of say, okay, based on the survey, has it confirmed what we had? What do we need to add to our needs, if anything? And then, next steps based on that. And I think it's interesting to go through this first because some of these are sort of bleeding into the very specific technical asks, which when we get into the feedback that we had on the technical things, we can see where there's some overlap here, and it'll be interesting having gone through this first. So. Okay, so I guess anything we should talk about before we close out today, just because we're over time? No, well, thanks for everybody's time, and we hope to see you next time to sort of continue this discussion, which is quite interesting. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye.